Today I'm going to show you why I believe that cutting a man off is one of the very best ways to get him to miss you. So I started ex-boyfriend recovery in 2012. So I've literally witnessed thousands of women utilize just so many variations of no contact on men and studied sort of how they reacted. And the natural assumption that most people have is that by utilizing no contact or cutting a guy off, you'll instantly make them miss you. But I found that getting them to a place where they miss you, that's not always like a straight line. In fact, there's a lot of emotional value changes that are going to happen along the way. So for example, here's how guys typically feel when you cut them off. They're going to go into an initial shock. They're going to be in pain, genuinely hurt. Then they'll get angry. Then they'll seek vengeance. Then they'll get depressed. Then regret starts to happen. And then finally, acceptance. So what I'd like to do today is actually take a look at these stages on what is going to happen when you cut a guy off. Stage one is the initial shock. So you cut your guy off. You've decided to stop talking to him. You've temporarily removed him from your life. And I promise you it's going to come as a shock, especially if you were on previously good terms. And if you really think about it, this stage has a lot in common with the 5 stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Your guy's going to go into denial. It's going to be a shock to his system. They're not going to believe that you'd be willing to take such a drastic measure. And out of all the stages we're going to talk about today, this is probably by far the quickest because it really quickly paves the way for the next stage, pain. So stage 2 is pain. So when the realization, the shock hits that you've cut them off, when that wears off, that you aren't going to be talking to them for the foreseeable future, that it's going to hurt, they're going to feel as if all the time they invested with you was for nothing. They'll convince themselves that you don't care about them when that probably isn't true. It's going to feel to them like a full-on rejection. And it's interesting because this pain stage is probably the second shortest ones in terms of how long it'll last. And there's also an element to be talked about here, which is a lot of times it's because they can't get the last word, which leads us to stage 3, anger. It's human nature to feel angry after you've been wronged. We'll look at our private Facebook support group and you'll see some interesting examples of this stage. Here's a screenshot I found from January 18th. Well, I've just entered the angry state of no contact with my ex effective last night. Anger, it's an interesting phenomenon. One of the things we noticed was the fascinating role anger plays in a breakup. Even if an ex is clearly the one at fault, they find it easier to blame you. It's a way of internally soothing themselves by blaming you, by making you out to be the bad guy. They distance themselves from taking any blame themselves, which leads us very nicely to the next stage, stage 4, vengeance. What do we do when we feel wronged? Well, we seek vengeance. And this is an extremely potent feeling. So check out this study I found from the Virginia Commonwealth University. Across 6 experiments involving 1,500 participants, researchers found a clear and consistent preference for an immediate seeking of revenge. Let's take a look at that screenshot I just showed you. Our client's ex, unprovoked, sent them a message calling them a monster. Why? Well, revenge. It's a way to make our client hurt as much as they are hurting. Is it childish? Yeah. Does it happen often? Yeah. Then comes stage 5, depression. You want to know the funny thing about vengeance? Well, it's a short-term boost that maybe makes someone who's being cut off feel better in the moment, but long-term, those benefits just simply don't last. Instead, the realization that you may be gone forever begins to creep in. But it's interesting. Look at the journey it took to get to that moment. I think that's the single biggest misunderstanding that people have about cutting men off. They think that the results are instantaneous. They aren't. It's a primal journey filled with emotional change. And just because a guy starts to feel sad in this stage doesn't necessarily mean they're going to miss you. Our avoidant relationship death wheel taught us that. There's the 8 stages. I want someone to love me. I found someone. My troubles are over. I'm noticing some worrying things. I'm thinking of leaving. I've decided to leave this relationship. I'm so happy that I left. Wait, I'm starting to feel kind of lonely. Why can't I ever find the right person? And then we start over and over again. They need to sit in the depression stage for a bit before they begin to feel regret. And that's stage 6. One of the very best videos that I feel like I've ever filmed was about making avoidance miss you. At the time when I filmed it, I was a novice on avoidance. I understood the basics of attachment theory, but didn't really understand the nuances behind each individual insecure attachment. Over the years, I've taken a few quizzes and found out that I was a dismissive avoidant. I also found out that most of my clients believe their former partners were avoidant as well. Here's a crazy thing about avoidance. They don't tend to regret until they feel like there's no chance that a reconnection could ever happen. Often, they'll give themselves permission to feel nostalgia and miss their previous partners when they feel like there's no chance that reconnection could ever happen. Seems sort of like a backward way to operate, but if you understand the nuances of their attachment style, it actually makes a perfect sense. You see, avoidant attachment styles operates from a core wound of independence. This means that when anyone or anything threatens that independence, their attachment gets triggered and they're likely to flee. They like to do things on their own terms. So, commitment has to be their ideas. Well, same goes with recommitment. By cutting them off, well, they could still go through all the stages I've cited before this one. They aren't going to allow themselves to feel regret until they feel like you've moved on from them. They'll fall in love with the Phantom X. In fact, they prefer falling in love with the Phantom X. Now, ironically, when you believe your partner is smack dab in the middle of the stage, that's usually the best time to stop cutting them off and to start reaching out to them. Otherwise, you run the risk of encountering stage 7, acceptance. You ever wonder why I'm so adamant about not falling in complete love with the no contact rule? It's because giving your ex-partner too much time away from you can absolutely cause them to simply get over the breakup. It's one of the reasons that I don't believe in 90-day no contact rules. In fact, I think the longest you should ever be in no contact for is 45 days. The reasoning revolves around something I call the habit rule. Now, according to experts, it takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit. By that logic, it could theoretically take a guy 66 days to get over you. So if that's not the outcome that you want, why would you ignore them and literally give them the opportunity to move on? Contrary to what is being peddled out there online, there is a time limit on attraction and relationships. Now, to prove this, one of my favorite movies is Castaway. Now, the end of that movie, it's the Tom Hanks one, Wilson with the ball. He's castaway, stuck on an island by himself. But the end of that movie is not only powerful, but it's a haunting look at the concept I'm trying to talk about here. People don't wait around forever. Tom Hanks, he's literally cast away on an island, loses his freedom, his sanity, and the love of his life. So when he's miraculously rescued and comes back to the real world, did the love of his life wait around for him? No. She had moved on, got married, had kids. It's rare to find someone that's willing to wait around forever. Eventually, we accept what was lost and move on. So my argument to all of my clients is don't wait around too long before you try to reach out. Doing that can often lead to disastrous results. Instead, reach out during the regret phase. Doing so will usually be the phase where your ex is actually missing you and you get the results that you want.